So today I discovered I had these broken jumper wires. I thought I'd turn it into a soldering video. So what I'm going to do is, since I have this half of a jumper and I have this other half of a jumper, is I'm going to splice them and cut off this bad end and join back on this yellow good end. And then we'll cover it up with heat shrink tube, and then it will be usable again. So, you know what? I'm going to get the soldering iron heating up. This is a Hakko soldering iron that I bought from SparkFun Electronics for $50, I believe. But it has worked great ever since, and I would recommend it. I know that it can be a little bit pricey, so cheaper soldering irons definitely work. I would recommend one that has a box that comes with it and that you can control, but I mean, you gotta start somewhere. But this one heats up very quickly, and you can set the temperature, which, you know, I think that's kind of important to know what temperature you're soldering at, depending on what type of job you're doing, how much metal you're heating up. But for this case, I'll just go with 690, which is my standard. I'm going to cut off, well, pretty much all of it, because this is a bad connector. Oftentimes when I'm cutting off connectors, I leave a little bit left so that I can still use the connector for other projects, but this is an actual bad connector. I don't want to use it for other projects. Alright. Stripping a wire is quite an art, and there's about 101 ways to do it. But I just use some wire cutters. I have a little bit of water here. I'll wet the sponge. That's to help clean the iron. And you can put some solder on the iron, create a coating, sort of, and then clean it off. Get all the old gunk off. And then, I mean, you can get, for certain wire holders and little alligator clips and such. I probably have something in here. Yeah. You can have this to hold your wires, but whenever I'm soldering wires, especially small wires, I prefer to just lean it up against something so that the teeth don't bite into the plastic as it gets softened from the heat. So when you are soldering the wire, you want to first contact the iron onto the surface of the copper wire, and this will get the heat transfer started. And then you can start to add the solder to that junction. At this point, the copper wire is now tinned, where it's covered in solder, and that solder will easily remelt and connect with another junction. And so this time when I cut this one, since this is a good connector, I want to leave enough that's workable, so I'll leave about 1 inch. I don't want tons and tons of yellow because the rest of the wire's white, but you know, it'll work. I'm stripping off just about a little more than 1/8 of an inch. Obviously, the more you strip off, the easier it will be to work with. But sometimes I clip it a little shorter to make it nice and tidy. So they're both tinned now. So they'll join together real nice. Some people I know will like to twist the wires together and then solder. And that method works, but you might develop a little bit more bulk there. This is a little piece of heat shrink tube. It should fit, the heat shrink tube should fit very loosely over the wire, because depending on how much solder you use to rejoin it, that may end up larger than the wire itself. And I'll slide it as far away as I can so the heat won't transfer to it as I'm soldering and shrink it. I've definitely done that before. So then at this point, I'm going to, since they're both already tinned, now I'll add a little bit of solder to the iron. And then I'll just hold it so that it's touching. Give it a few seconds. Sometimes when you pull the iron away, it creates this little like burr on the top. You might have to go back over and smooth it out. That looks good to me. So then I just inspect it to see if it's really joined all the way around, and I think it's fine. So now I'm going to slide this up so that it is about halfway, covering it fully, half of it on either side of the junction. I could have probably cut off a little more yellow and then would have been able to slide this the whole way down, but if I do that, it exposes it, so I'm just going to keep it so that it's safely covering both ends. And then some people use lighters to do the shrink tube. I don't have a lighter nearby, and when I'm soldering, there's always a soldering iron, so my favorite method, or easiest method, is to I'm not even really touching the iron to the heat shrink tube, because as soon as you start to touch it, it shrinks away. I'm just lightly allowing the heat to, at a close proximity, shrink the tube. You have to be careful that the plastic here doesn't touch any part of the iron, or it'll start to melt your plastic. You don't want that. But that feels good to me. I might go at it from one more angle, but it looks like it's mostly shrunk all the way. So, and then of course, the last thing is, if you want to be sure, you can check it with a meter to see if there's continuity. On a simple fix like this, it's not really necessary, but if you're doing a lot of soldering and there's a lot of different wires, more chance you made a mistake. But this is just a continuity setting. It'll beep if there's electrical contact between the two, and there is. So great. It doesn't look as pretty as a brand new one, but it's almost, and it'll work just fine for making circuits. Well, I hope you learned something from this repair of mine. If you liked it, please subscribe to my channel for similar electronics related content, and see you next time.